Hey all, I hit a milestone that I wanted to share on my Raycaster. A few big things for me at least to talk about. So the first one is about a week ago, I was watching this new video from Optimus where he talks about how to manipulate the preamble or pre-0, pre-1 flags of a cell or CCB to have the cell engine do some clipping of a graphic or to create a sub-region. And after watching this video, I was convinced that this is how I should have approached my sprite drawing. So I'll give a quick demonstration of how I was doing it before and how this has really helped. Um, so he did an excellent job at that. So before, after my walls were drawn, I would then draw all of my sprites that were ordered based on distance to the player. And when I would draw them, they would cover up, they wouldn't consider any wall slices. So they would cover up wall slices. And then during that routine, my algorithm would determine which wall slices were drawn over, and then I would restore those. So not very optimal. It ran okay, but it was a bit sloppy. So to kind of visualize this, let's say all the walls are drawn, then this sprite is drawn, it clips this corner of the wall, and then I would determine this horizontal span needs to be restored. And so my code would start drawing wall slices from this column until this column again and stop. Um, so this won't look right, but just to kind of drive this home, it would basically put this back again. So it worked, but it wasn't very clean. So using the preamble flags, I'm able to now clip, so I'll just get this red line here. I'm able to clip the sprite right there so that none of this is actually drawn. And now I no longer need to worry about having to do any overdraw or any painter's algorithm. All the sprites are drawn in one shot. All the sprites have their pre-flags set based on the wall slices that are in the scene, and everything is clipped. So to get a little familiar with those flags, because I had used them for something else a while ago, but I just to get familiar with it before I started rewriting this part of my engine, I wrote a program to go through that. So let me launch that really quick. Okay. Okay. So I wrote this just to get a feel for it. Now, what makes it easier for me is that I don't have to worry about vertical clipping. I only have to worry about horizontal clipping. And what's nice is when you specify the subrectangle to clip, you don't have to worry about scaling. The cell engine will do all that for you. So if I were to move my starting column over to the right, you can see that it starts to clip. So I'm updating the preamble flags here. Um, if I decrease the end column, it clips this way. So by manipulating those flags, I'm essentially able to clip whatever I need. And this is nice. So if you scale, you don't have to worry about it. Um, it's still going to work. You're still specifying a relative clipping region. So after I got a little familiar tinkering with this program, I took that logic and put it into my engine, and it works great. Um, the next thing that I wanted to do was handle nice wall sliding. So before, when I would run around and hit a wall, the character would just get stuck because all it was doing was just checking for collision with the environment and then not letting you move. But I wanted something that felt pretty smooth. So I wrote another small program for that, just to kind of get a good visual of how I want it to work. And let me load that up and show you. One second. Okay. So you can imagine this as you're looking from the top down into the raycaster, and you can imagine that these are walls and that this is the player. This yellow vector here represents the viewing angle of the player. So you can see there as I turn, it's rotating around. This little dot in the middle, if you can see that, represents the player's position. And this square around him, I could have done maybe something with a circle, more polar, but I wanted to keep it simple. So I have the square, and this represents the player's bounding box. And the reason why I added that is because if I let the player get too close to a wall, it just doesn't look good. The pixels scale a bit too large, and it just looks bad. But this way I can control how big or small I want that bounding box, so I can adjust how close you can get to a wall. And so if I move around based on my viewing angle and I collide with a wall, the character will slide. And you notice that right now it's moving very slow. That's because the angle is not very steep. Um, the wider the angle, the quicker that slide will become. So it feels pretty good. If I move backwards, again, it reacts. If I strafe, again, it reacts. Um, you can move forward and strafe. I mean, it doesn't matter which direction you're going, it will slide and it will keep that bounding box into consideration to adjust. The challenging thing here was that the character is not moving pixel by pixel. The velocity based on your movement can be much larger than that. And so it's possible that if you're, say, right next to a wall, and then all of a sudden, that's a good example there, you try to move, your next position may want to go beyond that wall. And so I have to calculate where you should stop, and then I update the position so you cannot go beyond that. And there are two velocities that this is using. There's a vertical velocity and a horizontal velocity. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's right. And if one gets canceled, like let's say my horizontal velocity gets canceled, while the vertical velocity is still in effect. That's why I'm still able to move up and down and create that slide effect. So independent velocities, one velocity may be canceled out depending on which axis you're colliding with, and it creates a pretty nice little effect. So I'll show you that in the engine in a second. Another thing that I did was I created a death transition. So now when you die, the screen kind of fades out to black very slowly before it respawns you. You no longer have to hit a button to respawn. It looks better on the hardware. I recently tested my latest build on hardware and everything is running just fine. And then the last thing that I did was I tinkered with creating my own digitized sprites. So I started by getting a low resolution camera because I wanted to experiment what the sprites would look like if I didn't have to scale them down so much. If I use a more modern camera, I mean, my sprites in the engine are tiny, I'd have to scale them down quite a bit, and then maybe they would look super blurry. And so I was hoping maybe to have more of a pixelated look than a blurry look. And I created this green screen background, and I learned some things from that, just some mistakes that I made, but I'll be able to show you just a couple of digitized sprites that I took. Um, one second here, and I will pull those up. Let's see here. So this was one, and this was a little barrel that I took from this hobby store, and it had these dollhouse items in it, which was kind of perfect. So I took this and I took a picture of it, and then I took this little plate of food, and I wanted to use this as health. And you'll see in a minute in the engine, but one of the biggest mistakes that I made that I learned afterwards is that I should have had independent lights. One light focusing on the object, one light on the green screen. So the way that my lighting was set up, it created this very rough background, and it made it very difficult to key off a color and to clip the green out. And also I may experiment with using black instead of green, because I noticed that it added some green hue to the actual object. Maybe from the just the light, the light reflected, and some of the green kind of bled into where it shouldn't have. It was kind of a pain to clean that up. I don't think you could get by without doing some manual pixel work. I used GIMP for that, but next time I try doing this, I have some lessons learned. See if I make it better. So with all that said, let me start up the engine. And let me close that out. Okay, so I dropped a couple of my little health meals there. They don't look too bad. I did have to trim them though, because the 3 slices of bread just made the sprite too wide. Okay, and then here's a torch, and then it's nice and clipped using preamble adjustments, no redrawing whatsoever. So now a look at the wall sliding. Very nice. So I'll strafe into that wall. It even works if you collide with a sprite, a static sprite. And since the doors are really just walls that are being pushed in a bit when I calculate the distance, I don't have to worry about any weird, issues where you may get stuck. So it's working pretty well. Here's that barrel sprite that I digitized. Yeah, it's coming together. And then the death animation, you'll see the screen fade out. All right, well, that was about it. I just wanted to show these things here. For me, they were pretty big. I've been working on them for over a week, and banging my head against the wall on a couple little things that were tricky, but it's really working very nicely, and I'm really happy with the frame rate. I think next what I'll do is spend a little time working on the Sprite AI, the animate Sprite AI. It's not too bad right now, but sometimes the enemies will not get stuck, but look like they get stuck, and it looks a little funky. So I'm going back to work on that. And then just some minor cleanup. I need to make sure I'm releasing all the memory that I'm allocating per level. I've already gone through the exercise a couple times, but I want to be extra careful and make sure that I'm cleaning up after myself. And I want to experiment using some lookup tables to see if I can gain some more performance there. Not that I feel like I really need it right now, but why not make it better if I can? And thanks for watching, and I hope you found this interesting.